Hello and welcome to Vox Markets. I am John Human and I'm very pleased to be joined once again by Jeremy Skillington, Chief Exec of Poolbeg Pharma. How are you doing, Jeremy?
Doing all right, John. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. Very busy morning on the news front today. We've got your full year 23 results and also a very interesting bit of corporate development on the rare and orphan drugs front as well. We'll come on to that in a bit. Let's start with the results. Very busy year. We've spoken about it on numerous occasions. Perhaps give us a start with the key highlights.
Yeah, listen, we've had a fantastic 2023. We kind of talk about that. Been through a lot of key highlights as it were, multiple key milestones as we're pushing our pipeline forward, as it were. And I think very excited towards the end of last year where we brought on some former executives from Amrit Pharma, a company co-founded by Cathal Friel, who was focused in the rare disease orphan drug market. They were ultimately acquired by Chiesi Pharmaceutical last year for $1.48 billion. So, we decided to kind of take the colleagues, Laura, John, and Dave, and bring them on board and basically help us push Poolbeg forward as well. So bringing their expertise in. So all go on that front, pushing it forward. I think a key highlight too last year was our identification and, let's say, exploitation of the use of POLB 001 into the treatment of cytokine release syndrome associated with cancer immunotherapy. So that was a great identification moving forward on that front. I think it's kind of backed up by the LPS challenge data we had last year. This is an exciting area to move into. I think on top of that, standard in the industry, we also advanced our intellectual property portfolio, getting patents granted in the area. Again, this is key to protect the programs, add value to the programs, make it more attractive to partners. So very interested in that. And I think we also presented at the ASH conference in the US. This was the American Society of Hematology, talking about the use of POLB 001 and cytokine release syndrome, which garnered a lot of interest from the industry. Again, the use of a small molecule to not just treat, but potentially prevent the onset of this cytokine release syndrome was something that really drew a lot of attention. And we did an in-depth market analysis of that space. Again, it's an emerging space because these say CAR T and bispecific drugs will be the next wave, next generation of cancer therapeutics. And we're looking here at a $10 billion market for the treatment of CRS in those areas. So again, fantastic 2023 for the company. I think it's worth highlighting as well that we have a very disciplined capital allocation approach. So we were happy to end the year with 12.2 million pounds still in the bank. So again, our capital light is where we started. So we're, I'd say, allocating our capital very efficiently. So fantastic 2023, but we're off to a fast start in 2024 as well, with a lot of activity, a lot of milestones already hit. So great time for Poolbeg, great time for the company.
Yeah, indeed. You preempted my next question, which is, with so much going on, how have you managed to really operate in such a capital discipline way? Because, beyond POLB 001, there are other strings to the company's bow as well.
Yeah.
And what then does that mean in terms of being so well capitalized in terms of how you can deliver going forward on your many ambitions?
Yeah, I think we're very disciplined. I mean, we said this in the start that, you can burn a lot of cash in this industry, but we've established, we selected our development approaches to be very cost efficient, cost effective, I think is a better word, where we're getting a bigger bang for a buck. The LPS challenge study is a good example. It didn't cost a lot of money, but we got human data, which again is what pharma partners look for when it comes to moving programs forward. So, we've negotiated deals and transactions. We've been, aggressive, let's say, in that aspect where we've kind of kept costs low. And through other collaborations, getting clinical data where the partner is responsible for that aspect has been very beneficial as well. So again, we're very disciplined in that sense because we do appreciate, you can spend quickly in this industry, but we don't intend to do that. And obviously want to bolster that then with partnering transactions to again bolster the cash balance in the not too distant future.
Yeah, you made some progress on the AI front as well. A couple of key milestones hit there in terms of the programs you're running with your AI partners.
Yeah, no, it is true. Like we've talked about this previously, where we have two programs in the infectious disease space: influenza and RSV, respiratory syncytial virus. We had this unique data set, that came with when we spun out of hVIVO. That again, we always stated nobody else in the world has this data set. It's very clean, it's very unique. It's human challenge data where healthy volunteers You come in, you deliberately infect them, you get samples, you track the course of disease into recovery. So we had this fantastic data set where we used AI companies, collaborations, to analyze this data to better understand what's going on from a disease progression and recovery standpoint. And nobody has this clean data set. People have sick patients who show up in hospital and take samples and try and analyze that. But we've got, say, like for influenza, it was 130 volunteers. So you had a data set for 130 patients. We moved through those collaborations. We did a lot of in-depth AI analysis of the biology of the immune response. We came up with interesting targets for what the body does in response to being infected by influenza, as an example, but then how it recovers. And again, the plan is to move forward with these novel targets through collaborations to exploit and develop new therapies for the space, which again is much in demand. I think there's every year you have your seasonal influenza, and they're looking for solutions. So it was a fantastic way to leverage AI, leverage other companies' capabilities beyond their own. We brought a fantastic data set, but to leverage other people's capabilities to again unravel the biology and understand the disease better, and then obviously understand what targets to go after to treat these diseases.
Yeah, and as you say, in a very, very efficient way of doing that sort of thing. So perhaps talk us through what we can expect in 2024. The announcement that you've also put out today perhaps gives us a clue of some of the directions you'll be taking this year. Perhaps talk us through sort of generally what we can expect this year and the specifics of your deal with Silk Road Therapeutics.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, we were delighted to to get this deal across the line with Silk Road Therapeutics. You're right. We've kind of stated, and I know we talk about let's say mimicking the AMR approach. They did fantastically well focusing on rare and orphan diseases, and these are diseases that affect a smaller number of the population, let's say. So there's benefits to that where you get accelerated reviews of your data packages from, say, the FDA, for example. But we had some good discussions with Silk Road Therapeutics, who have this very interesting, it's a novel topical mucoadhesive formulation of pentoxifylline, which is PTX, is kind of known, it's been around for a while. But what they noticed was, and they've got phase 2 data, so this is kind of later stage in the clinical development path. But this works well where the drug, you can kind of say give it topically, it sticks to the ulcers, and actually helps recover, repair, the progression or the recovery from these ulcers from these patients who suffer from Behçet's disease. And again, it's a disease that's not well, it's understood. But as I say, these kind of these models that I get can be very debilitating because it affects eating and talking, swallowing, etc. So this is kind of a significant issue. But to give credit, Silk Road Therapeutics took this forward all the way through phase 2. As I say, we took an option agreement where we're going to do a bit more diligence. It's a 12-month option agreement with kind of a nominal fee to move that forward. But I think what's fantastic with this is that we're working very closely with Silk Road's founder, Tim Cote, who has fantastic experience in this rare and orphan disease space. I think it's worth commenting on that. Tim has 23 years of service with the US federal government, in the FDA, in the NIH, CDC, Center for Disease Control. But he served as director of the FDA Office for Orphan Drug Product Development. So again, fantastic to be collaborating with Tim to kind of pave a path forward to move this through the clinic and ultimately onto the market. So we see this as a nice synergy, as I say, between Poolbeg and Silk Road, where here's a rare and orphan disease, a direction we're taking. And having Tim's kind of expertise as part of the collaboration will be a benefit as well. So he as I say, it's kind of a fantastic, it sets us up nicely, I think, to kind of broaden out our pipeline. And that's a key aspect for what we're doing. I think it's recognized, any pharma company, biotech company worth its salt, you have to have a pretty robust pipeline, drugs at different stages, moving things forward. But Tim is fantastic to have on board. I think an interesting side note, he's presided over decisions of over 1,400 orphan drug designation applications. So he's seen it all, he's done it all. And I think from a Poolbeg standpoint, a terrific guy to be collaborating with, to move his drug forward. And I think he's as I said, we're looking forward to progressing that as we do further diligence on the regulatory and development aspects of this oral PTX.
Yeah. Sounds like a fantastic partnership and perfect for Poolbeg. I mean, you mentioned it's gone through phase 2. This is somewhat down the road towards commercialization. Can you talk about the commercial attractiveness of this deal?
Yeah, as I say, like rare and orphan diseases. Actually, I should just a correction. It's not an oral PDX. It's actually topical. Just to correct on that, as I say, which is important because there are oral PDX out there, and when you take it oral, it gets into systemic circulation and kind of gets all over. So having a topical, improves the, say the dosing aspect, gets it to the site of action that it needs to be at. So I think that's kind of key. But you're right, the Behçet's itself is a rare and orphan disease. It's kind of, the patients have, as I mentioned earlier on, kind of debilitating issues that need to be, resolved. It's caused by inflammation of blood vessels and tissues. And as I mentioned, there's a diverse range of symptoms, but more commonly these oral ulcers, which, as I mentioned, impact eating, drinking, and speaking even. So there's other aspects as well, like genital ulcers, inflammation of the eye, skin lesions, but quite significant. And there's very little out there. There's no cure identified. So these are kind of areas where, and we talk about orphan and rare diseases, it happens in a small number of patients, relative to these say bigger diseases. So there's an incentive for companies to develop in this space. So I think that, given the phase 2 data that they have thus far, which shows that successfully demonstrated accelerated oral ulcer healing, which again, fantastic that demonstrated that, decreased the pain, versus the standard of care. So we know the drug works in this kind of, phase 2. But again, importantly for these rare and orphan diseases, you don't need a very large phase 3 study. And this is where we got to do a bit more of our diligence on the clinical and regulatory path required. But we do feel we could kind of, as I say, with the incentive of being in rare and orphan diseases, you can get that accelerated reviews and approval of these drugs. So, taking it to the market, we think that, we can accelerate that path as well. So it'll be very interesting. Again, obviously looking out towards partners as well. So fantastic to get this, option agreement across the line, because as I said, we see it complements well with the Poolbeg strategy, and indeed, our existing pipeline and moving that forward as well.
Yeah, so just going back to the existing pipeline, perhaps you could talk us through what we can expect in 2024 on that front.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, we're kind of moving all of those forward. I think the key point where we're pushing forward for the our lead program 001 in the treatment of cytokine release syndrome associated with cancer immunotherapies. So we've talked in the past about progressing that through to clinical study to validate that approach. And I think we're making good strides there. We've good interest in from pharma companies. We talked about presenting at the ASH conference where there was good interest and interest in pharma companies to provide us with drug to run these studies. So obviously we want to expand that further into getting it through the clinic, getting this key data as quickly as possible. And kind of also in parallel, we're looking at the oral GLP-1 program. And we've touched upon this before. The GLP-1 drugs are making great strides and inroads into obesity as an indication. You're seeing dramatic weight reduction, but these drugs typically are given by injection. So there's limitations of, as I say, there's a great preference from not just patients, but the industry as a whole to have some oral varieties of these. So we've got, fantastic oral technology that we've licensed from a collaborator, Anabio. And from that, we're moving that forward into an oral proof of concept clinical trial. So moving that into the clinic this year. And, so we're going through all the regulatory aspects right now and talking to the MHRA in the UK to get that study up and running. And this is a relatively short study where we should have data coming through. Patients enrolling will not be an issue, and having data coming through relatively quickly that we can analyze. And as I say, get that proof of concept data that we want. Does this drug through oral delivery get into systemic circulation and have its biological effects, these GLP-1 agonist effects? So that's of interest as well. And obviously on top of that, moving forward with our AI programs and obviously doing diligence further on the Silk Road Therapeutics drug as well. So again, there's always a lot going on, John, at Poolbeg Pharma, but very excited for all of those aspects. And as I say, encouraging discussions with pharma around that CRS approach, which we did file patents on this last year, and I think they're particularly keen on this prophylactic, to prevent CRS from happening from their variety of immunotherapies that are currently either approved or in the clinic. So again, we've expanded the team, as so 2024, yes, we're 4 or so months into it, but we've achieved a lot thus far, and we'll continue the momentum that we had in 2023, and of course for the rest of the year.
Yeah, no, lots to look forward to, and congratulations on what's been a fantastic year of progress and your latest deal. Thank you for speaking to us, Jeremy.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that. Yeah, let's say it's non-stop, but it's as I say, it's thrilling. We have a fantastic team around us here that moving everything forward. But as I say, there's lots done, but always there's lots to do.
Yeah, indeed. Good to see. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.